Hello, everybody. This is Tony Callis. There's something I've been meaning to talk about for quite some time, and there's really nothing I can show you mechanically other than a bore-scored cylinder and an engine block of a modern car or a piston that's damaged. But what I want to do is just give you some advice on starting and driving your Porsche. If you have an air-cooled Porsche, I would recommend that you start it up and let it warm up for 3 to 5 minutes before you take off. I don't think 10 minutes is too long, but I think once you get into where the engine is actually getting in some temperature, that you want to make sure that you're running it or driving it, because the engine oil viscosity will get thinner and idle is the lowest point. So I would say maybe 10 minutes max. Don't let it, be careful in the garage when you do that because of the carbon monoxide. But on an air-cooled motor, what I'm concerned about is the engine case and the heads and the studs are all, they're dissimilar metals. Sure, the cylinders and the heads and the case are generally aluminum unless you have an earlier car and it's magnesium. But that's even more so the case where you got to be careful. But you have to remember everything's held together with either a dial-a-bar or a steel head stud. This came about from all the years of working on these cars, right? And my father had a Porsche shop from 1970 in Austin, Texas, and I've been around these cars my whole life. These theories don't come from being a parrot and watching things on the internet. This all comes from hands-on knowledge, empirical data, whatnot. So to me, it's very, very critical that you pay attention to your air-cooled car and you let it warm up a little bit and then you take off. Again, I don't like an idling engine too much because of the low oil pressure. I would definitely be careful of that, but let your air-cooled engine warm up a little bit. Okay, water-cooled cars as far as Porsches. So I used to our garage is a little bit down the way from the house, so I used to go get my wife's Boxster. I would start it up and I would go back to the trunk. And it was very rich when I went to put something in the rear trunk. And I was shocked at how rich these cars are. And what they are is they're in a mode called warm-up phase, where they're heating up the cats and the oxygen sensors. And it's a very rich condition. That's how this has come about, this video. This happened many, many years ago, probably started around 2005 when I started noticing this stuff. And we didn't have very many bore scoring issues then, or we didn't realize that it was particularly an inherent problem with the M96 and M97 engines. But what happened was I would notice how rich the engine was, and I was amazed by it. So I started telling her, listen, when you take off in the morning, and of course there's caveats to this, right? One is the ambient temperature outside. I would call it 30 to 40 degrees F. If it's roughly 35 or 30 to 40 degrees F or above, I would take off immediately and keep it under 3,000 RPM. Once many years ago, a customer in Edelweiss at the shop in Torrance said, yeah, I'll treat it like there's a raw egg underneath the gas pedal. Very critical. So when you have a water-cooled car, what I would do as far as a Porsche, I would start it up and take off immediately. If you're in that above that Fahrenheit reading ambient. Maybe if it's sitting in a garage, you can do this anyway, if it's 0 or 20 degrees outside, but you probably won't be driving your Porsche anyway. But I would be very careful on how you treat it until it gets to operating temperature. Either one of those cars. Do not go to redline until it's at operating temperature, and keep the RPMs low, especially if you have a stick shift car, because as you know, you can lug it. You can give it full throttle in second gear. When you first take off, you short shift it, get into second or third, and you can keep it under 3,000, but really applying a lot of throttle pedal. So if it's 30 to 40 degrees F and you've started the engine, I would take off immediately, keep the request for load down, and just take care of it that way. The other things you can do is to change the engine oil every 3,000 miles. This is regardless of what you hear. And make sure you're using a good boutique lubricant, such as Motul, Brad Penn, Driven. There's a lot of really good engine oils out there that are boutique ones, and that you will get a good quality load-bearing surface or lubrication surface from that. So again, these are my theories about bore scoring. I'm not saying it doesn't have to do with piston load or angle of the rod and whatnot. Sure, there are things that are definitely part of this, but I guarantee you, if you change your oil every 3,000 miles with a good oil, you cut the engine oil filter open every time and inspect it. You pull the engine oil pan down every 20,000 miles and have an inspection there. You change your fuel injectors every 60,000 miles, because I just absolutely can't stand ethanol fuel. It's a huge problem for us. And you change your chain tensioners every 40,000 miles. I think basically you're going to be okay, as long as it doesn't sit outside in weather below 30 ambient and you're starting it dead cold, because that's a problem. If you're going to be doing that, that's a whole slew of problems we're going to have to handle. But we all know that the cold weather definitely is the main contributor to bore scoring. If you have a car that you drive normally, it's in a garage, excuse me, it's 30 or 40 degrees F outside, and you start it. Again, if it's an air-cooled motor, I would let it sit for 3 to 5, 10 minutes idling, and then you can take off and keep it under red line or request for high load until it gets to operating temperature, which I call 7 or 8 o'clock. If it's a water-cooled car, you want to take off immediately and keep it under a low load. Do not request too much. I hope that helps you, and I think I've got everything in there, and have a good one. Enjoy your Porsche.